One of the things that has become more obvious for a lot of my patients is that before they had their brain injury, maybe they could tolerate sugar and they didn't notice any ill effects from it. And then after the brain injury, all of a sudden eating sugar became a very obvious trigger for them to have a headache or to feel more brain fog or to feel horrible the next day as far as energy levels. If we have a increased permeability of the blood-brain barrier and an increased permeability of the gut barrier, well, then we're probably going to be much more sensitive to, sugar and alcohol and processed foods and just stuff like that, that maybe somebody didn't quite notice ill effects from prior to their injury. And now those things are really problematic. Welcome to Life After Impact, the Concussion Recovery Podcast. I'm Dr. Ayla Wolf, and I will be hosting today's episode where we help you navigate the often confusing, frustrating, and overwhelming journey of concussion and brain injury recovery. This podcast is your go-to resource for actionable information, whether you're dealing with a recent concussion, struggling with post-concussion syndrome, or just feeling stuck in your healing process. In each episode, we dive deep into the symptoms, testing, treatments, and neurological insights that can help you move forward with clarity and confidence. We bring you leading experts in the world of brain health, functional neurology, and rehabilitation to share their wisdom and strategies. So if you're feeling lost, hopeless, or like no one understands what you're going through, know that you are not alone. This podcast can be your guide and partner in recovery, helping you build a better life after impact. Chaandani Khan, welcome back to Life After Impact. It's so good to see you again.
Thank you. It's always great chatting with you.
Yeah. What's new since I talked to you last?
What's new? What a question. There are so many things since we spoke last, as I had a really packed summer season. Just a lot of exciting business building, some pivots in what I'm doing as well. On a personal level, it was so busy. I did a little bit of travel. So I got to go to New York, which was really nice, and a couple other smaller local trips. So I've just been on the go since we chatted last.
How'd you do with New York? I know that can be a bit of a sensory overload.
New York is definitely sensory overload, I think, for a lot of people, whether you are functioning in a neurotypical way or in a neurodiverse way as well. If I practice what I preach, I have all my strategies stacked up. So I felt pretty good when I was there. But I definitely did have some moments where I thought about the times when I was really in the depths of my struggle years ago and how that wouldn't have been possible for me to just walk down the street and feel like anything in my system was relaxed and calm and safe. I did actually specifically have a couple of moments there where I just really recognized how great things are for me right now and in my system and in my space of recovery.
Well, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this particular episode with you today, because I feel like you would have a lot of insights into our topic, which is surviving the holidays, where we often are doing more than we're used to, often committing to more social events and putting ourselves in places where there's going to be a lot of people, a lot of noise, a lot of lights. And so I thought it would be great to do an episode that is not just a holiday survival episode, but a thrival episode.
I love that. A thrival. Oh my gosh, that's so cute. I'm going to borrow that word.
Please do. Please do. So this is our holiday thrival episode. And I figured we could maybe start out by talking about just planning, right? So planning ahead. And I know it can be easy to say yes to everything or feel like we have to do everything. So one of the things that I think would be a good thing to keep in mind is choosing your events wisely, right?
Yeah.
And so not feeling obligated to attend every single gathering, but maybe picking the ones that matter the most emotionally. Like, who are the people that you really want to see or spend time with, as opposed to feeling obligated to just do everything that comes your way.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point. And this is actually advice that, people who are neurodiverse or experiencing neurodiversity um, definitely will resonate with them, but also people who are not. I think this is just solid advice anyway, just to really anchor into what will move the needle forward most for you emotionally, so to say. What's going to feel the best? What's going to light you up the most? If we hyper focus on the concept of brain injury and overstimulation and all these different things that we can struggle with, I think really, again, just leaning into what lights me up the most in this moment is a great space to be in. It definitely involves a mindset shift. But when you're able to do that for yourself, everything becomes a little bit easier around you.
Yeah, for sure. And I know for me, it is easy to kind of like how do I want to say it? I think that I'm always capable of just adding more and more and more to my plate. And
Yes.
then all of a sudden it's like then you realize, oops, I just stepped over my edge, right? And so
That's it. And especially for people who have, you and I share this inner A type, or maybe I sometimes refer to myself as like a recovering A type, which is not a dirty word. Really, it isn't. Like it's something that I've always loved. And I say with pride and with support for. Um, But when you have that tendency and then have an injury and then you recover, it's very easy to go back into that tendency or just to say, this is my set point. This is the familiar. This is how I've always shown up. So I like what you're saying. I think it makes a lot of sense. And just actively choosing what to partake in is really important.
and then the follow-up to that in terms of like sometimes we could set a time limit on, okay, I have to go, or feel like I have to go to this event, or I want to go to this event. Maybe I put a time limit on how long I'm going to be there.
Yes, yeah, it is the concept of just kind of re-exploring what that could look like. Maybe you can attend the two events that you have that week, but maybe you just need to shift how you're doing it. I think that this involves a little bit of creativity as well as some flexibility and mindset again. Just saying, perhaps like in my old self or before I felt the way that I feel right now, I would have gone to the entire events. They're 4 hours each, they're 10 hours each. But just you still can be there. It's just, how does that look?
Yeah, and so you're from Canada, but in Minnesota
Mhm.
we have this concept called the Minnesota goodbye.
I would like to know what this is.
Okay, so this is basically when you're ready to leave, you feel obligated to say goodbye to every single person at the event.
Okay, so then I have that inside me. Like that is me in the Minnesota goodbye. I had no idea.
Yeah, and so before you know it, like you hit your limit, you're ready to leave, and then all of a sudden you're
Right.
there an hour and a half later because you then had to have
Right.
a conversation with every single person in the room on your way out
Okay.
the door.
You know what? That is very solid advice to avoid the Minnesota goodbye, to sit with yourself probably before you go into the event and really just set your mind on when I'm ready to leave, this is the process I will follow, or at least have some kind of a framework of what that looks like.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was called that. Now I know. I feel seen.
Well, I have a friend who this back when I was living in Oregon, he was notorious for showing up to a party and then disappearing. And he was like the opposite of the Minnesota goodbye. And so
Yes.
you never knew. It was always like, "Oh, where'd he go? Where is he? Oh, I guess he left." And
Yeah.
I think that maybe we should embrace the opposite of the Minnesota goodbye and just practice a disappearing act and be okay with that.
You know what? You're not wrong on that. And you know what? To be very honest, that is something that, okay, so my natural set point is apparently now I know the Minnesota goodbye. That's how I used to operate. But since my brain injury, I've done a deep dive into boundaries and into mindset and into just re-exploring how I show up. And so, I mean, I am a person that nowadays, at least, I do attend a lot of events. And so I am frequently around a high volume of people. I'm probably speaking with a lot of them. And I have to say that I've done pretty well in means of deciding internally. I'm like, okay, well, it's time to wrap my night up. And the people I'm talking to in the immediate group, I'll, wish a good night, maybe just kind of make eye contact across the room. Bye, it was nice talking. And then, see myself out. So it's kind of a blend of those two worlds, but it definitely does take intention for me to do that because it's so
Mhm.
easy just to pop by and especially if you're networking, I run a business. So
Yeah.
you're networking and you want to say, "Hey, it was great chatting with you. Let's connect on Wednesday," or, whatever it is. So Just,
Exactly.
yeah.
And I mean, for me, I always do well with one-on-one. And so if I am in an event like that, I think it's helpful for me to maybe see it as an opportunity to say a quick hello to somebody and then use that opportunity to be like, oh, and you and I should get together at a later date, just the two of us, where there's not like all this chaos happening.
That's a great way to do it as well. I mean, to be honest, like even getting together with somebody without all the background noise and chaos, like that's just a better conversation probably. At least I could say you'd use energy more efficiently and perhaps be able to dive in a little bit deeper, remember things a little bit better. There's a lot to be said about that.
Yeah, yeah, especially
Um,
for people like us who maybe aren't super interested in just having a bunch of shallow surface level conversations with
You
people.
know what? You say that, and I absolutely grin because I was just speaking with somebody else who's also a survivor, a very high functioning individual. She's a keynote speaker in the brain injury space as well. We were just speaking yesterday, and we just had a little giggle over that exact concept. So feeling really seen in that.
Mhm.
And along the lines of kind of mentally preparing yourself for your departure, or mentally preparing yourself to be at this event. Another idea is to kind of communicate ahead of time with the host, maybe either what your needs are or what your time frame is, just so that kind of helps to relieve a bit of like anxiety or pressure that you're feeling, and also set expectations for others.
Yeah, and if you are going to an event where there is a host that you are close with or that you know well, maybe as you're doing your non-Minnesota goodbye, you say hi to the host, and then they can now be your spokesperson for saying, "Oh yeah, they left
Yeah.
already."
That is a powerful strategy. Yes, completely. At least then the host knows. And if someone is looking for you, that's fantastic. The host can inform them. Not that it's the onus is on them to do so, but at least they're aware of where you are.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I think you and I had spoken, and you'd mentioned how important wording can be when you're communicating with anybody, but especially in this case, communicating with the host. Did you want to share some thoughts that you have on that?
Yeah, I think one of the things I pay attention to, especially when I'm working with my patients in the clinic, is I'm paying attention to
Hmm.
how people are phrasing things. And I think
Hmm.
that for me personally, when I use a phrase like instead of I have a brain injury, to say a phrase like I'm recovering from a brain injury,
Hmm.
it leaves
Hmm.
room for it leaves room for recovery. It leaves room for the hope. It leaves room for the fact that improvements are happening rather than having kind of an identity that says I am injured,
Hmm.
right? Or I have
Hmm.
a brain injury. I just like to use a phrasing that doesn't necessarily create an identity around being
Yes.
stuck, but an
Yes.
identity around I'm working through this. And so sometimes that phrasing, even though it may be subtle, I think it's profound in the way that we are wiring pathways in our brain and the way that we're thinking about things and the way that we're communicating things. And so that's just one of the things I like to throw out there to, the patients that I work with as well.
Imagine trying to do something good for your body, like make a high protein smoothie for breakfast or after a workout, only to find your protein powder is full of junk. Heavy metals, artificial sweeteners, and chemicals you can't even pronounce. It is frustrating when you try to do the right thing, but instead you just end up adding to the toxic burden in your body. As someone who cares deeply about what goes into my body as well as the patients that I work with, I believe that what we consume regularly needs to support our health, not silently sabotage it. That's why I use Puri. Their protein powder is made from clean, high quality ingredients, and it's third party tested for heavy metals and contaminants because they don't just say it's pure, they actually prove it. You can find collagen peptides, whey protein, and plant based options on their website. Check them out at puri.com. That's PUORI.com, and use the code LIFEAFTERIMPACT for a 20% discount on your first order.
I love that. And I think it's really important, like what you're sharing from an inner self dialogue perspective, as well as when you're speaking externally to others. I just want to echo what you said about really the body is always listening to us. And so, whatever you're feeding it, our subconscious is just constantly receiving and saying, great, I hear you. I'm going to pull that into my existence, right? Just to take this like a level deeper. And so to your point, like whether you're sharing with others externally and really just helping them to understand that I'm in a period of recovery. Maybe you don't have to say this is what it looks like or this is my end date because you don't know those things, but let them know. And your body is also listening to everything you say. And it might sound like the most granular, smallest, silliest thing to some people, depending on your mindset, depending on where you are in your recovery, but genuinely these things all do add up and they do make a difference overall.
Yeah, I remember one time my mom coming up to me and saying, I just realized that I have spent the last 20 years of my life saying, I have insomnia. And so she kind of had
Wow.
this epiphany of like, man, I've been telling
Mhm.
myself I have this, right?
Yeah,
And
right.
she just literally that one day was like, I'm never saying those words again. Like, I'm not going to
I
say that.
love that. Was that after speaking with you? Was that a conversation you had with her? I wonder if you just naturally you show up this way and she kind of picked that up in a conversation or just the way you were speaking.
I don't think so. I'm not going to take credit for
Mhm.
that one, but I do remember
Okay.
her saying that after she
Yeah.
intentionally stopped saying and telling herself on a daily basis that she has insomnia, she's like, my sleep actually got better when I stopped telling myself this every single day.
It's so true. And I mean, oh my gosh, there are things like neuro-linguistic programming, there's loop affirmations, there's, universal laws behind this we could dive into. Perhaps we'll stay on track for today's purposes, but
Sure.
but really, it is I mean, or not. Let's just see where we go, right?
Absolutely.
But really there's so much behind what you're saying. And I just really want to like highlight this point for anybody listening who's working through a brain injury, regardless of if you're at, the early, like you're early into it, whether you've been at it for years in your recovery, it is so important. And it's not something that it's not a strategy you just use and you instantly receive gratification and you instantly see a difference in, but very much over a period of time.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree with that.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's definitely a philosophy that can be applied to all areas of life, whether you're
It
talking about
can.
money or anything, right?
Mhm. Oh, we could dive deep. I sense another episode coming. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
on the note of events, there's something that is really important. This is something that I still very much actively need to talk to myself and tell myself and intentionally choose to do this strategy. But scheduling rest days between events. This is something that is critical to be able to show up as your fullest self and also not totally get to the end of your energy and then just exhaust yourself for days after. Referring to them as neuro recovery days. I think this is something you could speak to a little bit as well.
I think this is one of those things that almost happens unconsciously in my mind where if I know, like for example, my sister's planning, we have a book club that we're in that she started like 16 years ago. And so we always do a holiday book club event. And so I actually have to see patients that entire day, which is going to mean that I'm going to drive 40 minutes to work. I'm going to see patients back to back all day long. And then I have to drive an hour and 40 minutes right to her house to get there late for book club. And then I'm probably going to stay the night. And so already in my brain, I'm like, ooh, that's going to be a long day.
Yeah, I mean, you're saying that, and I'm just like catching my breath a little bit for you. One, because I totally relate with taking that kind of a day on, but also two, because that is a long day, and you don't have that critical downtime, that critical rest period in between. Even if it's 15 minutes of rest or silence or just like a calm environment. Yeah, so I'm catching my breath for you.
Well, and sometimes when I need a moment like that, even if I'm in the car, I mean, I live out in the country, so the drive is going to be lovely.
Okay, that's nice.
And so sometimes I do just turn the radio off. I turn the podcast off. I literally just drive in silence and focus on my breathing and take that minute of, okay, let's just like have nothing external stimulating our brain other than just driving through the country. So,
Yes, no, that sounds like a really good reset. Just a note on that piece. I am really glad to hear that that is something for your system where that is peaceful and that's not full downtime, but pretty close to it. It sounds like you're able to strip away the external stimuli. Just a note for other people. Myself, for example, driving was a task that was extraordinarily challenging and really just zapped my energy to the point where, again, when I was in the pit of my experience, in the pit of my recovery, so to say. There were a lot of times where I wouldn't drive a vehicle because I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel that I had enough within me to be able to operate that vehicle. So this just also just goes to say, how subjective the experience can be, and how, perhaps if somebody lives in a similar area to you, maybe that is something that they could try as well on those days. Again, the concept of scheduling rest days between events, I'm thinking about my upcoming holiday season, which for me, I celebrate Christmas. And, I was just talking to my partner about this yesterday and saying, I have overscheduled. Hard stop. I need to I need to bake some rest periods, some downtime into what we're doing because it's just so full on. And so that's something that I'm personally working on, and just wondering, re-envisioning how this could look, because I don't want to. I don't want to do that. I want to show up. I want my stack days. I want to see all the family members in 3 different cities in a short period of time. However, this is something that, I'm actively going to work on as well.
Yeah.
And just see when and how I can do that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think when you bring that intention to it, it's then it's going to happen, right? If you don't intentionally focus on it, it's not going to just naturally happen.
Absolutely. That's it. Like a huge piece in brain injury recovery is learning that skill of intentionality, and learning how what that can look like for you and how to pull that into your experience. Because when you are in an experience of your brain no longer operating the exact way that you always knew it to, something has to change, right? And if you, I mean, I will just put myself out there and say that for the first year, I struggled a lot, and I really fought against my brain, and that didn't do me any justice, right? So, it's not, if for people who are listening, if it sounds like it's easy for me to say right now, it's just that I've gone through it, and I've really reworked that, and heard from so many other people who are in a space where they are fighting it in different ways, but intentionality is something that can really, really help.
Yeah. And you've had those experiences where you didn't listen and you thought you could just push through it, and then you suffered the consequences after the fact.
Yes, I have deeply humbled myself on a number of occasions. And that's exactly, genuinely, even though I am so many years out, this is something that I am cognizant of for me, that I still partake in, is scheduling, downtime and rest periods, just so that I can show up as my fullest. So it's still an active practice for me. I'm 6.5 years out. Just to, share with others, hopefully you feel seen in what I'm sharing, and what you're sharing as well, Ayla.
Yeah, I think the place where I haven't done a great job of that is a lot of times if I'm teaching a weekend workshop, I will be
Mhm.
trying to cram as many patients into my schedule before I have to leave town. And so I'm like
Yes.
working, and then also simultaneously preparing for the seminar. And then by the time I get to the
Mhm.
seminar, I'm already feeling exhausted and burnt out. And that's a
Absolutely.
terrible feeling because I want to give these
Mhm.
people who are paying to hear me speak my
Yeah.
best, right? And so
Yes. Yes.
moving forwards, like one of my
Mhm.
kind of resolutions, not necessarily a New Year
Yes.
resolution, but just one of my resolutions
Okay.
is that same thing as like not just for holidays, but for work too,
Mhm.
balancing,
Mhm.
juggling a clinic and a teaching schedule, really
Yeah.
wanting to make sure that I can show up when I have to teach and feel like I am
Mhm.
refreshed and I do have energy and I'm not showing up exhausted and burnt out and frazzled and
Yes, and important to say that, when you are showing up, I know that you are you have an incredibly high capacity. You are incredible in this space. You lead a lot of change, a lot of thought. You help others in so many different ways. And it's important to say that, when what you're describing, I think a lot of people do relate with, whether they have the same level of capacity or if they have a different capacity, but whatever their body feels is a lot for them. And it's just this feeling, and I understand it personally, this feeling of I can do it, I can show up, I can have a smile on my face, I can be charming and delightful and educate people. But it's the way that you feel inside. And I just want to highlight that that's what you're sharing. If people are listening and maybe they haven't had our shared experience that we're talking about with brain injury, it's that you can do these things and people can see you in a certain way, but it's a mask that we're putting on still in different ways to be able to show up, to be able to serve, or even just to be able to have a casual hangout with your partner on the couch after a long day, and really be present in that moment.
yeah, because wearing that mask is also work. It
Mm.
takes work, it takes
It's
effort.
hard. It's hard work. It's very hard. It's those moments that, maybe you haven't, you being Vu, being everyone, perhaps universally, maybe someone hasn't, you know, they haven't balanced their day very well. They haven't balanced their week very well. And you've been wearing a mask, you get home, you take the mask off. And for me, I try not to do that too often, but it's not perfect, right? Like sometimes I do end up doing that. And it's just this level of weight that you feel even when the mask comes off, just because you're like, whoa, my whole system has been just firing at every single part has been firing away, and now I can breathe. And it's almost more tiring in that moment. So, bouncing back from that is a bit harder than if you just have downtime and really balance how your body needs.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'm saying this publicly so that I then have to stick to it, right? It's like
I know,
the
as
more
soon as
people
you
you tell, the more you're like,
yes, I
okay.
know. As soon as you said this is my resolution, instantly I was like, oh, she's holding herself to this for sure now. This is out.
Yep,
Not
yep,
only with me, but with everybody listening.
yep.
So, yeah.
I'm kind of notorious for having really bizarre New Year's resolutions. So I come up with some pretty interesting ones.
Okay, listen, here's the thing is we're talking on your podcast. Part of me was just like, okay, give me a really weird one, but I don't know that I'll put you on that spot. We could also, move
Well,
our conversation
we
along.
could, okay, so I think one of the funniest ones was
Yeah.
one day or like one moment, I felt like I'm such a rule follower. So my New Year's resolution
Hmm.
was to just try to break a few rules, like break a few more
Ooh, okay.
rules.
You know what? I like that. I like this for you. It's like it's like flexibility and mindset as well that you're challenging,
Yeah, it's like, the door
right?
says no public access. Maybe I just crack the door open, see what's behind it.
And her life of crime begins.
Well, that was probably back in like, I don't know, a couple years ago. I'm not in jail,
Mhm.
so we're good. We're good.
I'm teasing. No, no. I mean, what you're sharing, I think there are such manageable ways to do that, and I can see like the application to like more like greater parts of your life as well with doing something like that, and just it's really challenging yourself to think outside the box in ways that you wouldn't normally.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And
Hmm.
I think
I love it.
one time I did actually crash a private party at Prince's recording studio. And that's like one of the best stories I've ever had in my life, right? So I'm like, maybe I need to break more rules and just bring a little bit more excitement
Maybe
into my life.
maybe excitement into the life of others, right? Like all those people, I'm sure they were so happy to receive you. They're like, "Who is this? Great, we're glad she's here now."
I
So,
don't know about that. I did get kicked out very politely.
okay, okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Doesn't mean they didn't enjoy the interaction, even if they're asking you to leave, right?
that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yes. But anyway, okay. So moving on.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
next, let's talk about managing the sensory load because when I think
Mhm,
holidays, right, you think bright lights, flashing lights, loud
mhm,
music,
mhm,
obnoxious music, all the things.
mhm.
And
We do.
yeah, when I was a teenager, I had a job at wrapping gifts at the Buckle, and so I had to listen to like holiday music playing on a loop for 8 hours a day as I wrapped
Just
presents.
nonstop. Wow,
Yeah,
if that's
and
not feeling, holiday or Christmas, I don't know what is.
right, yeah. So, and there was one particular annoying song that just every time it came on, I was just, okay, please, please, can we not play this 20 times an hour? But anyway, so avoiding sensory stacking, in the sense of if we know that we're going to a place where there's a lot of lights or sounds and conversation and people, I know for me personally, if I'm talking to somebody and I'm having a hard time hearing them or I'm having a hard time concentrating because there's so much happening, I will frequently say to that person, like, can we just step into another room where it's a little bit quieter?
Yes.
And I take myself out of the situation where I know I'm not doing so well.
That's so smart, and it also speaks to just how you've gained this level of comfort in asking for what you need, which is so important in this space. It's a skill that I think it comes over time, and it does involve intention. Surprise, the word intention coming back for us again. And I think that's a beautiful strategy. That's, I very much relate with what you're saying as well. And I know a ton of people listening do as well. Just when you think about the holidays, it's true. Like it's not just bright lights, it's flashing bright lights, it's different colors of lights. It's that stacks with movement, with people around the room, with laughing, with food, with eating, with oh my gosh, all the sounds as well. So that's a great strategy, and I hope other people try that out. What I do as well is if I'm talking to somebody and, maybe I'm further away from a place that would be quiet, I often say, hey, can you just come with me? And I'll find a wall and put myself against a wall, with my back against a
Mhm.
wall, because that limits the sounds behind me. If there is a chance when you're coming into a space or maybe a dinner or maybe an event and there is a chance to sit in a chair with my back against a wall, I will always do that. And sometimes I will just so boldly ask someone, hey, like, would you be open to me switching seats with you? I had a brain injury and I struggle to hear. And although there are more complex processes happening than struggling to hear, quote unquote, it's something short and sweet that a lot of people are able to easily understand. And
Absolutely.
then, make a decision of if that's okay to switch seats, for
Yeah.
example.
Yeah, and like you
Yeah.
said, you kept it brief, you kept it sweet, and most people
Yeah.
would not hesitate to say, "Of course, I'd be happy to switch seats with you."
Exactly. Or even if we're having a chat, like I don't know, I try to be kind of charming about it and giving my secrets away. Now, if people listen and I'm networking with them, they will know what I'm up to. But, I might say like we're in the middle of chatting and I'll say, "Hey, walk and talk with me." And they're intrigued. So we just drift into, an area that's a bit quieter and much like you're saying. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, love it.
Um, Earplugs as well. Though I used to carry, I'm not kidding you, three types of earplugs with me to every event that I went to, just because it would give me the option. They had, varying levels of, I guess you could say like sound protection or background noise canceling, if you will. And to be honest, it was to the point where I would not leave the house, or if I had left the house and I'd forgotten even one pair of earplugs, then I would be late going to the event. I would take time, I would go home, I would find them, I would pack them, and then I would leave again, which, as you know, it can chip away at your precious energy source, especially when you're in a space of really struggling in that way. But to me, it was just so worth it. I would often wear, I preferred in-ear earplugs. I won't give any names right now, but there are different names that are really big on the market. And I would usually just wear one in my ear at events because it would, the way that I would describe it, it would cut background noise enough so that I was able to just focus with my one ear. The only thing is that it worked really well for me personally, just with how, I was struggling in really chaotic, noisy environments. But when speaking one-on-one, it was a little bit more challenging to speak with somebody, and I would find myself turning my ear to them, which eventually I just gave into. And I was like, you know what? I can't hear that well. So if I'm leaning into you with my ears, I'm just really focusing on what you're saying.
Sure.
Again, another strategy.
I think that's a great one. And I know some people also like to use just tinted lenses, wear glasses that
Yes.
and everybody has a unique preference for what color lens
Hmm.
seems to give them the most sense of relaxation. I know for some
Hmm.
people, green works great. For other people, the rose tinted
Hmm.
or the red tinted. But so
That's right.
for some people, just kind of removing a certain wavelength of light, just filtering out certain
Hmm.
light is enough
Hmm.
to just get a little bit more of a relaxation effect into their nervous system in a place where they're
Hmm.
already feeling overstimulated.
Exactly. And this is something that I think more people need to know about because, what I know now, of course, I wish I knew then when I was struggling the most, but there were a lot of gaps in my treatment plans and my recovery. And I really could have used some type of lenses, like cloudy days when it's just overcast but really bright outside. Those were so exhausting for me. Like I would just be flattened. And now I realize a little bit more about the visual system and tinted lenses and all they could do for you.
Yeah, and I think, obviously where I live, there's lots of snow. And so when you
Mhm.
have the
Yeah.
white snow and the sun glaring off that
Mhm.
snow, I've also done a lot of research
Mhm.
into just sunglasses in general. And there is a big
Mhm.
difference in the quality of polarized lenses in terms
Yes.
of how well they work and help your eyes to relax. And sometimes,
Uh-huh.
certain brands or less expensive brands might not actually be
Mhm.
working as well, and they might cause you
Yes.
to still have some eye strain that could be relieved by a higher quality lens. So the quality of the lens really
Mhm.
does matter, especially when you're trying to cut out a lot of that glare.
It really, really does. It makes a difference. And when you talk about polarized lenses, I even think back to growing up. For some reason, I had a lot of friends who were lifeguards, and they would wear polarized lenses when they were working. And even, in that case, they weren't working through a brain injury necessarily, but they saw a great difference in their energy and their eye strain and their ability to actually do their job for 8+ hours a day and, be under the sun at water and such. And I think that is such a great tip for people who live in snowy environments. To your point, yes, they generally are more expensive, but if you're able to kind of pick and choose types of tools that were really meant for your brain injury, I think that's a really important one.
Yeah, for sure. And
Mhm.
then you kind of alluded to this one already, but one of the tips is this idea of positioning yourself strategically. So whether that means if you're in a room, like you said, you put your back against the wall, all of a sudden there's not a bunch of sound coming from behind you. But also, I think for some people, like I had a patient who suffered from psychogenic seizures, and flashing lights were a trigger. And so if she was out at a restaurant and they would have, a Christmas tree or something that had lights on it and it was flashing, she just knew right out of the gate. She's like, I should not sit in a place where that tree is in my line of sight because it's probably going to trigger a seizure. And so even for people who maybe it's not that extreme, but they know sometimes you can sit somewhere and just you're immediately kind of irritated by what you're having, what is happening in front of you, right? And
That's it. Yes.
and so again, going back to we talk about the Minnesota goodbye. There's also in Minnesota, we talk about this Minnesota nice thing where a lot of times people won't advocate for themselves because they don't want to appear rude. And so I feel like I've struggled with that where I don't want to appear rude by saying, I can't sit here, or can you turn your lights off, or can you change your environment for me?
Yes.
And so I've kind of learned, I think I learned this behavior of let me just sit and suffer through it. And I think as I get older, I'm now a little bit more willing to say, I'm going to change spots, or I'm going to move, or I'm going to do something so that I'm not sitting here feeling super irritated and a sense like have sensory overwhelm because of
Yes.
this flashing light that I have to stare at from this particular scene.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I mean, I'm so glad to hear about that evolution that you've experienced just in means of social convention, in means of, familiarity, in means of your own internal dialogue as well. That's huge. And that's something whether someone is, in Minnesota, has grown up in or has lived in that type of environment, or I think that's true in a lot of different cities, a lot of different countries. This is something that, even, I'm, yes, Canadian, born and raised here, lived, however, I've spoken to a lot of people from a lot of different areas of the world. B, I've traveled quite a lot in my life, and I see this quite consistently that, it's a way of being polite. You don't want to impose upon others, right? But enter brain injury into the chat, right? Like this becomes a very different conversation and a very different topic. And I often refer to, when I had my brain injury being enrolled in what I call boundaries 101, because really, well, you're laughing and, people, us insiders, we know it just brings a different lens on your entire existence. And it's kind of up to us to either in these moments like what you're describing, sitting in a room with flashing lights or just feeling so deeply irritated because there's so much stimulation around you and your system's overloaded. It all of a sudden with brain injury, it becomes a question of, well, protecting yourself and your needs, it's self-preservation in a sense, right? And there are ways to have those conversations with others. There are ways to ask, but I think it starts with coming from within. It starts with you finding a way to be comfortable and in asking someone to switch seats with you, or maybe wearing your tinted lenses in a public space, even though you're like, no one else is wearing green or red lenses. I feel silly. But just finding ways to say like, hey, like this is what I'm doing. And to me, that lumps under the lumps. It can be lumped under the category of boundaries, where you're like, I want to be in this space. What's happening is not okay for my system. I am going to do X, Y, Z to be able to change this for myself.
Absolutely.
And it's not something that happens overnight. It, really makes me think about, for the first year and a half, 2 years, I had an extraordinarily hard time putting to words all that I was experiencing, the levels of loss, the levels of struggle, and I was constantly having to check in, whether it was with doctors or well-meaning friends and loved ones, right? Saying like, how are you today? And I'd be like, oh, not good, but I wouldn't really go into it. And then one day, it was a very distinct moment. I was sitting at the kitchen table, and I just had this moment where I was trying to do a little bit of journaling, although I couldn't write very well either after my brain injury. I had a lot of spelling errors, etc. And I just had this moment where I thought, no. I'm just not doing this anymore. The next time someone asks me how I am, I choose in myself to be very honest. And if that makes them uncomfortable, I'm okay with that. That's not my purpose to make them uncomfortable, but I actively choose to speak my truth. And I'm not kidding. It very much happened like that one day. And I just did. And I did see, when someone asked me how I was like, actually, I've had a headache for 5 days straight. I've only eaten like a couple of fruits because I can't remember how to cook. I'm forced to drive to a lot of appointments, but sometimes I can't remember what a green or red light means. And I have anxiety. And that was, a good friend and, keeping in mind the concept of emotional dumping and such and sharing and like where that lays. But just being able to speak so honestly and share things like that really changed a lot internally in showing up for myself in the ways that I needed. And again, not emotionally dumping, but that was just sort of my gateway into being like, oh my gosh, I can share these really hard things that I've been hiding for so long.
Yeah, because that's exhausting too. When again, it comes back to the
Yeah.
idea of like having to wear a mask can be so exhausting
Yes.
if you feel like you have to act like everything's fine. I'm going to hide just how
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortable I am in this
Mm-hmm.
moment or in this day.
Mm-hmm. Right. Exactly. Exactly. And so we're talking a lot about like overstimulation and just being aware of environments, and I think we should segue into how to support your system. There are lots of different ways that, when you think about the holidays, you think about attending events, you think about being social. Maybe it's social in a massive group, like you're at a festival in your city. Maybe it's social with having, three friends in someone's home, having a book club night or having some kind of like a Christmas craft or holiday craft that you're making, right? I know that you talk often about food and supplementing your system that way. Did you want to start us off?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that was helpful for me was the fact that I needed to go gluten free a long time ago. But when I did that, it started to become so obvious to me just the food industry as a marketing system that really just takes advantage of every single holiday. And so when you can't eat the pink cupcakes for Valentine's Day and the green cupcakes for St. Patrick's Day and the blue cupcakes for Easter, whatever it is, right? It's like you start
Yeah.
to just realize, wow, every single holiday just becomes an opportunity for the food industry to sell me something that is artificially colored and completely sugar laden. And once
Yes.
I was forced to give all that up, I was kind of grateful that I'm like, this isn't even an option for me. And I always actually developed a sense of, um, I don't know if pride is the right word, but a lot of people say, oh, I've gained 15 pounds over the holidays. And I never wanted to have a yo yo diet. I never wanted to have a yo yo weight. And so for me, this whole idea of just overindulging or eating or drinking too much because you've got celebration after celebration, I knew that my body was just way too sensitive and I didn't want to even create that challenge in my life. And so for me, it was always, okay, how do I modulate this? Like I need a game plan going into this event, whether that game plan is I'm going to eat dinner before I go to the dinner, or I'm going to, bring food with me, or I'm going to bring my own beverages. And I think now that's become pretty normal because so many people do have food sensitivities or food allergies or, don't drink alcohol. And so I think at this point in society, that is so normal. It's become normalized. It's no longer like you're the weird person if you have to bring your own gluten-free whatever. Like
Yeah,
so
right.
so that's the good news.
That is good news.
Yeah, like
For all of you who are entering this space now, your path is carved for you in means of dietary requests or restrictions or preferences. It's true. It's very much normalized, like just the concept of having a different diet. And, for someone with a brain injury who, like yourself, maybe you're bringing your own beverages, maybe they're non-alcoholic, you're bringing your own food, your own snacks. At this point, you could probably even tell hosts. People, hosts sometimes are asking too, like, do you have any preferences? And it doesn't even require you to go down the whole, oh, I've experienced a brain injury, I'm working through it, etc. It might just be like as surface level as, okay, no gluten.
mhm.
That's it.
And I think one of the things that has become more obvious for a lot of my patients is that before they had their brain injury, maybe they could tolerate sugar and they didn't notice any ill effects from it. And then after the brain injury, all of a sudden eating sugar became a very obvious trigger for them to have a headache or to feel more brain fog or to feel horrible the next day as far as energy levels. And I think sometimes that's a hard connection for people to make. And sugar is just an example.
Hmm.
If we have a increased permeability of the blood-brain barrier and an increased permeability of the gut barrier, well, then we're probably going to be much more sensitive to, sugar and alcohol and processed foods and just stuff like that, that maybe somebody didn't quite notice ill effects from prior to their injury. And now those things are really problematic.
It is. It absolutely is. And I'm so glad to hear just how you broke that down, because so many people don't know about any of what you just shared. They don't know about the blood-brain barrier. They don't know about the gut-brain axis. They don't know these things. And I was one of those people, after my injury. It's something that I learned after struggling, after feeling challenged, after digging myself into the concussion space, after, meeting with some incredible professionals. These are things that I started to take on and learn. And now I kind of tuck those away. And those are my fun facts that I'll just like drop on people sometimes. I'm like, did you know? But it's so important that, your people, I think if someone doesn't come from a sporting background or a medical background, nor have people in their lives in those spaces, they perhaps just are not as aware of the brain's connection to the entire body beyond the brain controls everything we do, right? But when you actually have an injury, it's something that just really puts the brakes on your life and forces you at a certain point to kind of look at these things under a magnifying glass. And if something isn't working, generally also, as you know, in this space, if people are chronic, if their symptoms are, lasting longer than a few weeks to a few months, you kind of become a little desperate to start understanding what's going on and what can I take on. And so people go down this, research rabbit hole, if you will. But for others who haven't done that, it's so important to hear what you're sharing.
This was part 1 of my conversation with Chaandani Khan about not just surviving the holidays, but thriving during the holiday season. Please join us next week for the second half of our conversation, and we wish you a very happy holiday. If you have a holiday survival tip you'd like to share, please email us at lifeafterimpact@gmail.com. And the one gift I would love to receive for this holiday is a review of our podcast on your favorite streaming platform. Thanks for listening to Life After Impact, the Concussion Recovery Podcast. Medical disclaimer. This video or podcast is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute the practice of medicine or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is formed. The use of this information and materials included is at the user's own risk. The content of this video or podcast is not intended to be a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment, and consumers of this information should seek the advice of a medical professional for any and all health-related issues. A link to our full medical disclaimer is available in the notes.